The last 4 in Nashville. Previously, he lived in Knoxville for 38 years. He is a graduate of UT Knoxville and an avid Tennessee volunteer and Atlanta Braves fan. Bryan is a father of 4, 1 son, 3 daughters, and he is the grandfather of 2 beautiful granddaughters. Stella, age 5, Lucy, 6 months. Wow, young one. Keep you moving. Everyone, please welcome.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I appreciate you all inviting me here today. The bad news for you is we're talking about technical statutory stuff this morning. The good news is it's morning and not afternoon. I hope I don't bore you too much or confuse you too much because we get confused every time we go through the purchasing statutes. They are scattered throughout the Tennessee Code. Most of you probably know that. We do appreciate the invitation and opportunity to speak with you today. What I want to accomplish with the presentation today is cover some of the more prominent purchasing systems and related statutory requirements in local governments in Tennessee, and relate those to our audit application and how we audit and apply those statutes when we perform our audits. And we'll address some of the more common purchasing deficiencies that we include findings in our audit reports from. To get an idea of the crowd, how many of you work for state agencies? Okay, how about county governments? 2 counties. And the rest, municipalities and nonprofits?
Public housing.
Pardon?
Public housing.
Okay, public and county. Want to introduce Leanne West. She's here with me today. She is the manager of our West Tennessee area, and she and her staff perform audits of 23 counties here in West Tennessee. The money cop, Justin P. Wilson. Justin also sends his greetings today. They're busy. Sessions wrapping up, and that always keeps us hopping in Nashville when that's happening. I think they're probably going to wrap up next week. We got the budget coming up for final consideration Monday and Tuesday. Justin was first elected in January of 2009. Constitutional officers are elected by a joint session of the House and Senate every 2 years. And he is only the 3rd comptroller since 1955. William R. Snodgrass was comptroller for 50-some years, I think, and then John Morgan was there for about 10 years after him. Justin is just starting his 6th term. He was reelected in January, so he'll be there at least 12 years. On the right, Jason Mumpauer, and that's he's the deputy controller. And I don't know if many of you know Jason, but he is from Bristol, Tennessee, and he is a former member of the State House of Representatives. Jim Arnett is the director of local government audit, and he is my boss. He's the boss over all of local government audit. Now, only 2 of you from county government. I'm going to give you a disclaimer here. All 39 years of my experience in the comptroller's office has been spent advising, assisting, and auditing county governments. So a lot of the discussion that I have today is going to be drawn from my experience with the counties. And most of the general statutes that we talk about today will also be applicable to the cities and some of the other governmental entities throughout the state, a lot of political subdivisions. However, as you all know, in the cities, you also have to look for supplementary requirements in your charter and local policies. Key point, we always have to make this when new officials are elected every 2 to 4 years in the county governments. is that statutes governing local government operations, including purchasing, are permissive and not prohibited. So you can't do something just because the law doesn't prohibit it. You actually have to have a statute that allows you to do what you want to do. And the other thing is, the statutes also have to specifically address local governments. If you're auditing a local government or you're purchasing for a local government, there are permissions in the statutes, even in the general law, that governing the state procurement office that are not applicable to local governments. One of the questions that we hear quite often is that general services or the state procurement office has the authority to do this, like no bid contracts or negotiations. So why can't we do the same thing if it's authorized in the statute? And the answer is that the statute specifically authorizes those state offices to do certain things that does not authorize the local purchasing officials to do. Okay. Another problem I had with coming up with this presentation, it's really hard to organize all the statutes throughout the code into a sensible organizational structure. So what I decided to do is we're just going to go from the first of the code to the end and try to hit everything that's more prevalent purchasing statutes. The first general statute found in 51125 is that county officials or employees, and this will also apply to local governments, I think, in a separate statute, prohibited from purchasing surplus property except at public auction. So you can't take a laptop and say, well, we value this at $200, we want to get rid of it. Hey, would you like to buy it? One of your employees. That is prohibited in the statute. But if you do it on e-govs, if you have a public auction, they can, because that puts them on the same footing as all the other citizens, as long as it's advertised properly. Okay. There's two general public chapters that allow for centralized systems in Tennessee county governments. One is called 1957 Acts, the other one's 81 Acts. Now there's a little bit of differences between these acts and the general law. General law supersedes certain things that apply to all. Some things in the 57 and 81 will supersede the general law. But we'll just go through some of the more prominent requirements of these by act. We'll start with 57 Act, and we probably got, of the 95 counties, I think we've probably got maybe 20 or so that are still in the 57 Act. Very rare will a 57 Act also include school department. So most of those are just for the county general government of the mayor and the highway department together. We do have a few that the schools are have opted in on under 57. Roane County comes to mind. They're a 57 Act that include the schools as well as the rest of the government. The purchasing agent powers and duties under the 57 Act has exclusive power and is purchasing agent's duty to contract for all purchases and supplies, materials, equipment, and everything else. No other official, employee, or agent of the county shall be authorized to contract for or purchase any such material, supplies, or equipment. Now, this act does provide for a purchasing committee, so if you're the purchasing agent in a 57 Act county, you've got some support there from your committee to help with those purchases, but you've got to purchase everything and issue all contracts. And something else we see in particular is we'll see sheriffs, for instance, sign a contract for some purpose, whether it's medical for the inmates or whatever, and that's a violation of this act when that happens, because the purchasing agent is the one that should sign those contracts. The county purchasing agent and the county purchasing commission are also responsible for adopting the rules and regulations governing purchases in the county. And that makes it a little fluid because as things change, you can change the policies. Okay. And 514-108, there's a lot in this particular code, so there'll be several slides on it, I think. But purchases, sales, etc., the bidding and auctions from the 57 Act. All purchases shall be based wherever possible on competitive bids. And that's regardless of, that's a general statement regardless of the bid threshold. Okay. Contracts for legal services, auditing services, and by certified public accountants and similar services by professional persons or groups of high ethical standards shall not be based upon competitive bids, but shall be awarded on the basis of recognized competence and integrity. There's a little bit of difference in this, in these professional services exemptions in each of the statute, in the 57 Act, in the 81 Act, and in the general law. This is the more restrictive. This is the only one that CPA firms are mentioned in. However, it's generally held by case law that CPA firms are exempted from bidding in all three of the statute, of the general statutes. And bids need not be required for services for which the rate or price is fixed by public authority authorized by law to fix such rates. And so I think this was originally in 57 when this was put in and saying you don't have to bid utilities. But there are other instances probably where that would apply. If y'all have any questions, ask them as you go because we're moving topics pretty quickly. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't feel there was a space, but if you ask, I'm gonna say, auctions for canines. Because when you were talking about surplus property, we supposed to put our canines up for auction rather than selling them to the police officer when they retire?
I'll plead ignorance on that because I know.
I was like, oh, wait a minute, were we supposed to do that?
I know, what do you operate under, general law?
We're a city.
Your city?
And they do have a price, like we do have to research and we have to legally justify that we came up with that number. And if the officer wants it, they do have to physically buy the dog at a set price. We sure didn't put it up for auction.
I can research that for you, because I think that's one of those unique situations. I believe there's legislation that said it would first be offered to the handling officer, but I don't. Do you know, Leanne?
Another have to be firearms.
But what he just said, I mean, that's where Julie got panicked all of a sudden. We didn't make it public for all other citizens to have access while we're off. Holy moly, did I do that wrong?
Well, like I said, I think there's a statute that deals with the dogs, with the retired narcotic dogs specifically. Firearms, I'm not, I know there was some consideration of giving the service weapon to a retired police officer. I don't know that passed, but as far as I know, that's still under the auction of surplus property.
I shall Google this, but there's a chance that there's something that already addresses it.
Okay.
57, we did at one county surplus the dog. And then we have either donated it to another agency or in the resolution said.
But you didn't auction it to the world.
No. However, I have bought a dog on state surplus. I paid $20 for a blood.
Are we
Or this look. No, it was the state retired.
Oh.
So we still used it. A good dog, except if he hunted you, he's gonna bite you at the end.
Kids, he got retired.
The only audit issue that I know we've been involved in is where they retired a dog, and however it went, it was sold to the handler, or given to the handler, I'm not sure how, but the county also built some fencing at the employee's house in order to maintain the dog, so we were involved in looking into that issue. Okay, continuing on 514-108, the county may purchase materials, supplies, commodities, and equipment from any federal, state, or local government unit without going through the bid process. So there again, 57, 81, and general law, all are, the words are a little bit different. And I think in general law, you get into very specifics of what you can and can't do on the bid, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But this one just is very general. If it's another government, you can buy from them. The very last bullet point here, the county purchasing agent is authorized to purchase and contract to purchase materials on a fiscal year basis, but no commitment shall be made that extends beyond the end of the current fiscal year for which appropriations have been made by the county. So that one, as you all know, gets a little problematic. If you're a 57 Act county, it's very difficult to enter into long-term contracts for just about anything, but in particular, if you bid an item or if you're guaranteeing a contract, because this limits your ability to basically obligate funds beyond the end of the budget year. This is a general principle in governments, especially the political subdivisions, local governments, a general policy of you've only got funding for 1 year at a time. The county commission has to come back, for instance, in the county and reset that budget and appropriate funds again on next year. And that there is a need, obviously, for certain contracts, but that is an issue there. And I don't really know the answer to getting around that if you're a 57 Act. And the county legislative body may exempt perishable commodities from these requirements. That's a general policy that's followed in most all these as well. The perishables can be excluded from the bid process. And in 2 of the 3, fuel purchases can be exempted from the actual advertising. They still recommend that you get through bids, but you don't have to do it through the newspaper advertising process. Let's see. Got ahead of myself. That's on the next slide. That's the first thing there. And under the 57 Act, that's exactly what it says, to try, whenever possible, based on at least 3 competitive bids, but it can do it without public newspaper notice. And also, if you're in an area where general services has a contract that would be open to local governments, you can also go through services without going through the bid process at all. Okay, get into conflicts of interest. Now, conflict of interest is different in each of the ones as well, but it's the same in that 57 and 81 Act, because it says you cannot have a direct or an indirect interest in anything doing business with the county. So the indirect, or let's say the direct is if you are a sole proprietor or if you have a controlling interest in the company, then you can't do business at all on the direct. Indirect would be if you're an employee of someone, but you're not a sole proprietor, or you don't have the controlling interest. Then you can make the governing body aware that you have a conflict. And this, we're really talking about county commissioners, school board members, council members that have the requirement to make them aware of the indirect, and then either say you're going to vote your conscience or abstain from the voting. The AG strongly recommends abstaining from the voting in case that ever comes up for question in an AG opinion. Okay. That's all I've got on the 57 Act. There's a whole lot more stuff there, but that covers the basic points of the 57 Act. The county purchasing law of 83, this is called a general statute, but it's not applicable to very many governments at all. In Tennessee. It is for general government only. Highways and the schools are specifically excluded from it. So it has limited applicability. It's only for those mayor's offices that are all completely decentralized. And it really doesn't have that much different from the other laws anyway. Got the same rules as perishables and fuel. The only difference would be on the 5781 Act. You can probably set your bid limit a little differently, and this one would have a bid limit set for you in the 83 Act. We very rarely run into a county that we quote the 83 Act. And all Title 12, which is a general statute, would also apply to this thing. And we've only got a couple of county representatives in here, and it would only be for county, so I wouldn't worry much about the 83 Act. Okay, financial management system of 81. We've got approximately 25 to 27 counties. We've got a couple of Audit that are in implementation phase right now throughout the state that operate under the 81 Act. And in the Comptroller's office, as we audit all the governments, we recommend either adoption of the 81 Act or a private act that will provide for centralization for all county departments. And we just believe and have found with our experience over the years that you're going to be, if it's properly run, you're going to be more efficient and more economical in the long run. So we do recommend that formally as a best practice throughout Tennessee to adopt either the 81 or a private act. And we're getting more and more counties that are adopting private acts. We've had 3 in the last year. The 81 Act, the director as purchasing agent or an optional purchasing department. And so when a smaller 81 Act county adopts this, many times they'll have the finance director be designated as a purchasing agent, and really that just means they're responsible for the purchasing. Buck stops with them. However, most of these of any size at all, they're going to hire a deputy that will be in effect a purchasing agent that will carry out the purchasing. So, and the other option is you can actually adopt a purchasing department and hire a purchasing agent that is responsible and doesn't have anything to do with the finance director other than making sure the money's there. So they can go one of really 3 ways. Really small ones, we do know a few where the finance director actually serves as purchasing agent. And in that case, by the way, our opinion is they do not qualify for the $25,000 bid limit clause, if that's the case, because we look at that. I can get to that a little later, but the finance director is not spending their full time on purchasing, and so we don't think they qualify under that law. And the committee, let me back up a little bit. Under the 81 Act, you've got a financial management committee. They normally serve as the purchasing committee as well. That's made up of the mayor, highway superintendent, director of schools, and then 4 members appointed by commission. Some counties, that's 4 commissioners. Some counties, they'll get an extra board member, school board of education member, and 3 commissioners. But that 7-member committee serves as the financial management committee over the finance director and purchasing. And so they have responsibility along with purchasing agent for setting the policies and procedures that are going to be carried out. They've also got responsibility for setting the bid limit. Now they can set that if they've got a person dedicated to purchasing, they can go with that law that allows 25, and may by now be 50. I don't know. I hadn't followed that bill through the legislature. Do y'all know? there's a bill proposed to raise that particular statute from 25,000 to 50 this year.
It's stalled out in the house.
It did. Okay. It's sitting on the clerk's desk, we're going to summer study.
No, we had some, face some opposition with the association. We'll,
Tennessee Press Association has been very active this session. There was another statute of surplus properties that they've got put off for a while. And the language in that bill actually came down to, they were arguing over hand and or. So you can put it in the paper or go to internet auction. And Tennessee Press Association felt very strongly it should be and. So that,
Gee, I wonder why.
there was actually a lot of committee testimony in the Finance Committee about the losing the revenue in the local papers, rural small papers. So they're making no bones about why.
that's the real small agencies.
So, but anyway, the 81 Act also contains similar language to the other acts related to emergency purchases. I hadn't touched on this one yet, but emergency purchases shall be limited to the needs arising that are not normally foreseeable. And every time they talk about emergency purchases, they make some comment that failure to properly plan is not a reason, it's not an emergency purchase. So,
Really?
well, you'd be surprised when we see.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
Well, what I'm surprised about is they consistently put that language in all statutes.
Looks like they come up with a better one, right?
Yeah. Okay, while we're on this statute, I want to talk about, notice I've underlined lowest and best bid. And there's a lot of case law, there's AG's opinions on this, but as auditors, if you don't contract with the lowest bidder, all we're looking for, we're not going to automatically write you up and say you didn't take the lowest bid. We're looking for something to document, like if your purchasing committee has a discussion, we want to see the minutes, why you chose another bid. Why was it not the best bid, the lowest, the best? Was it because the lowest bid doesn't have a real good reputation, and you can document that you've spoken to other people that had bad issues relating to their work, something like that. Whatever the reason, and there are several that could be reasonable explanations. We're just looking for something that explains it. If we come in and see a bid, one of them's 100,000 less than the other, and there's no explanation whatsoever other than that, we want to go with this other one, then we probably got a finding there. And the AG has an opinion on this. It's on point. It's a little old, but he's also opined that there must be a compelling reason documenting the decision if you do not take the lowest bid. So all we're looking for there is just your reason why you didn't go with that lowest bid. And we see it quite often. Some of them just say, we didn't want to. Well, that's not a good reason why did you not want to? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. When you look at the lowest bid, if the amount is extremely low compared to the other bids and you choose the lowest bid, does that raise a question, or do we have to answer anyone?
Well, I think it would raise a question for you. If I was a purchasing agent, I'd want to know why. I want to have a discussion and say, why is this? And usually that second bidder will tell you why he thinks he or she thinks that it's lower. But yeah, I would definitely put some extra research in it if that's the case. May just be they're wanting to get in, they may be a reputable company and they're just trying to get in a new market or a new area or something. So there's all sorts of explanations, but certainly you should be curious when that's the case. I mean, at the end of the day, we're charged with checking compliance with these laws, and we're kind of, Comptroller calls himself the money cop. What we really are is watchdogs for the public funds, and we just want to see that they're being spent prudently because they are public funds, and we want to make sure that they're being spent well. And I think that's all you all want too, is to get the best value for your dollar and spend it on public funds with it when you're bidding out items. Okay, here's the committee shall authorize the dollar limitation when formal competitive bids are required, but shall not exceed the amount as authorized by state law for the highway and education departments or other such amounts as established by law. When it says exceed, it's generally held that it can't be lower when you're talking about the highway and school law. So some people do, and they agree to it, and they go on the highway and schools. Let's say if they go 5,000. And of course, we all know that the $25,000 law will supersede this, even if 81 Act can adopt that law. It's worth going up. So there's been a lot of debate as whether it talks about exceeding means lower or higher. Exceeding normally would mean higher, but there's still a lot of argument about it out there. And of course, this is just common sense, but it needs to be stated sometimes. The specification shall not be written to exclude vendors and contractors, to limit the bidding to a specific vendor or contractor. And we see this more times than you would think. We see it quite a bit. So they want one particular engine size because they want to stay with the same type of vehicle. This is especially prevalent in highway departments where they're really dedicated to one particular make of vehicle. And I've even seen people that may have some validity. They've actually documented why they feel that it's best for the county if they stay with that vendor, based on if they're doing, especially if they're doing like their own repairs, things like that. They stockpile the parts, their mechanics, let's say they're going with CAT. They've got a CAT mechanic on staff, and so they've made some compelling arguments to do that. But if you do that, you better make sure they jump through all the hoops and to document that. That would also be, you could still put it out for bid without getting specific into make, and still that would be an argument why you didn't take the lowest bid. So I was speaking to a group Monday this week about centralized accounting. We recommend that and what we recommend. And the highway superintendent said, well, if I turn this over to central purchasing, when I want a truck, I might get a Nissan when I really need a CAT. So, well, that's really not the way it works. You're going to be on the purchasing committee. You're the one that writes specs. You know, the purchasing committee is just going to carry those specs forward to make sure it complies with the law when you get the bid out. But we get logic like that a lot of times when we're talking to people. Conflict of interest statute again. As I mentioned earlier, the 81 Act also prohibits direct and indirect. And I may have misled you earlier when I said about the indirect. I think that they can do business if they make that comment. That's not under 5781. Those are prohibited in that act. It's the general law that they can do that in, that they can actually have an indirect interest, and if they hold their hand up and say they've got that interest, then they comply with statute. So 5781, you cannot do business with a county commissioner. You cannot do business with a school board member, a council member, or employees. Okay. The next one, and I got this in all caps and underlined because this is what we've had a lot of discussion about probably over the last 2 to 3 years. The provisions of Title 12, which is just about all of Title 12, pertains to purchasing of one sort or another. But anything before Chapter 3, Part 12 relates to the State Procurement Office and the General Services, and that's defined in the applicability section of the chapter, that it's for general services and the state agencies. And there's a few instances in there where you'll see local governments, and I'll go over those instances in a minute. But the political subdivisions and local governments are covered in Part 12 of Chapter 3. That's where they start. So anything before that, you see an authority in there and think, hey, I can do this. No, that's for the State Procurement Office. The places where they're actually mentioned, 123308 talks about contracts through or administered by social service agencies. And I think that one was really talking about local governments can get their social service contracts through religious organization. I think that's the purpose of 308. It didn't get carried into political into the local government statute, but it specifically local government and political subdivision there. In 123512, local governments are mentioned. And that's talking about the cooperative purchasing, and it allows cooperative purchasing. However, local governments have plenty of cooperative purchasing statutes on their own that clarify. I'm just trying to tell you where it's mentioned of local governments. And the last one is 123909, and it talks about developing and implementing energy efficiency standards, and says local governments can have them lower or better than the state if they want. It talks about the Energy Star and all that stuff there. But anyway, that's where local governments are mentioned prior to Chapter 12. Now we'll get into the general law. And there's a lot of information in here. Now, another confusing point is if you're operating under 57 or 81, or particularly a private act, the general law may or may not supersede it. We think general law supersedes in most instances for the purchasing. Especially anything adopted. Our lawyers in the Comptroller's office tell me that you have to research to see when the laws were enacted. That notwithstanding any other law has to do with dates of adoption. But most of the ones that we're talking about here, like the cooperative purchasing, those have come after 81. So they would supersede 81 or 57 Act. And we're going to assume anything I'm talking about here would apply to you regardless of what you operate in. Unless in the cities, you've got something in your charter, and the charter is more recent than the general statute. So you'd have to check with your lawyers on that. And we get a lot of legal questions, and that's what we say. We're accountants, not lawyers. Check with your lawyers about it. Okay. The Central Procurement Office may, upon request, purchase goods and services for any county, city, municipality, special district, school district, and other local government unit of the state, or quasi-governmental entity organized under city, municipality, or county. Purchases shall be made on the same terms and on the same rules and regulations as now provided for the purchase of goods and services by the Central Procurement Office. So, first of all, you can go ask them to make a purchase for you. And based on the statute, they can do things that you can't do. And that would probably be the instance where you'd want to ask them if you want something negotiated, if you want to no bid. Now, whether they'll tell you, I don't have time to do it, go away, or whether they'd actually do it for you, I don't know the answer to that. But there is authority in the statute that you can ask the Central Procurement Office to make a purchase for you. Okay. The next 12.3.12.01, we're going to talk about you may use contracts and price agreements already entered into by the Central Procurement Office. I think most of you are probably aware of that. The local unit of government may purchase without public advertising or competitive soliciting under the provisions of contracts or price agreements entered into by the CPO. So you can ask them to purchase for you. You can use their contracts and bids already in place. This next one this one kind of frees you up a little bit to do stuff locally. And it says that you may purchase locally if the central procurement office has a contract or price agreement in place. Yet you cannot purchase directly from their contract. Then what you can do is purchase that locally. Caveat to that is it has to be equal or better specs and no higher than their original contract price. So, that will free you up a little bit. I don't know situations, you all would know better than I, when they've got a contract that y'all aren't allowed to piggyback on or to purchase from, but evidently there are some enough that, yes, ma'am.
So does that mean that if there's a state contract for flooring or something like that, but there's not a local contractor in our area, that we could find a contractor that would match the specs and the pricing of the contract that you have for our local area? Is that what that means?
Yes, unless you, excuse me, if you can't buy off of that original contract that the central procurement office had.
Then you could find someone in your area that can follow those same guidelines.
As long as it's, yes, as long as it's the same quality or better, and it's no higher than the central procurement office contract.
I'd be curious to know if anybody in the room is using this provision.
Well, I can tell you why people wanted this, and it didn't allow them to do what they wanted to do when they passed the law, I don't think. Because what they wanted to do was, if, let's say we got Ford's bid out on state contract this year, but that vendor is in Murfreesboro. According to the contract, you've got to go to Murfreesboro to buy from that dealership if you want to buy it under the state contract. Well, people want to go to their local dealers in their hometown and get the same vehicle at the state price, which some of them are willing to do. Our experience was they really ended up being different spec'd out vehicles in many instances. But that's what they wanted to do. But this is still doesn't help people that want to do that, because you can buy off of that state contract. Used to, we'd see people buying from a dealership in Murfreesboro or up in Montgomery County, because those dealerships have the state bid on police cruisers. So I don't know where it would apply. It would have to be something that you couldn't purchase off of the state contract. Then you can go locally and get the same item. Metro Davidson and Shelby counties, anybody in here from those? No, they're excluded. They're excluded from that.
Right.
Where are you from?
National Electric Service. We're there, but not here, but not here.
In Shelby County or part of Shelby?
Shelby County government.
In Shelby County or part of Shelby County government.
Which one were you talking about, Shelby County
If you
government
were-
or Shelby County?
Well, the actual wording, I think, says that it shall not apply. You know, if you're doing a public chapter, you have to exclude it by population class. So it said a charter government with population in excess of 470,000 as of the 1980 census. Well, that's Metro Davidson. And counties with population in excess of 800,000, and that's Shelby. So, okay.
So that would include the municipalities within Shelby County.
I think it just, well, I don't know. Ask your lawyer. If I was gonna come in and do a municipality in there, I'd find out, but and I can find out for you, in all honesty. But I don't know the answer to that. Okay. Okay, the next one allows for you to buy from the Federal General Services contract. I think you're all probably aware of that you can do that. There's a lot of exclusions there. I think you get into the they don't like to sell new motor vehicles there, or I should say, automobile manufacturers don't like you to buy there, so they got excluded from the law. No purchase under this section shall be made at a price higher than that which is contained in the contract between General Services Administration. So there again, got to be careful that you're getting the same item if you're buying off any of these contracts. Okay, purchases of secondhand articles or equipment by municipalities or counties. First of all, you can purchase used equipment from any federal, state, or local government without going through public advertisement and its listing. And when we get into the next part, if you're buying from another agency, you don't have to go through the 5% criteria calculation. Okay. If you're going to go through and purchase from a private entity, without public advertisement, competitive bids, then you have to document that the general range of what you're purchasing is not more than 5% of the highest value of the documented range of value as determined by a nationally recognized publication or through an appraisal by a licensed appraiser. We have quite a few findings on that from time to time. Some of them say they did it, but they don't have documentation. If you're going to do a procedure, make sure you stick it in the file with the purchase. We had one that showed us Craigslist as a nationally recognized publication. We didn't think that was recognized. But if you're going to do that without going through the bid,
we have trouble trying to find a publication or appraisal for like heavy equipment.
Yeah.
Backhoes.
well,
That is difficult.
some of those, I think there's a secondary market publication, and it may actually be from one of the vendors, but it's about as best as we have found out there, and it does have some independence. I think we found one on for Caterpillar, and it seemed it wasn't something prepared for this government. You're talking about the value. And when we talk to people, that's where they went to determine value. So to us, it was almost nationally recognized. We didn't have a finding on that.
Do you know the name of this?
I do not. It's been a few. Since I had it. I'll see if I can find that out for you.
Okay. You'll give that to Debbie. Debbie will give it to all of us.
Hey, you might check with the General Services Administration or the Central Government Office. They might know about that. Now, while we're on this, let's talk about trading in used equipment. The statutes don't really provide for a trade-in. They provide for you to surplus it and go through auction if it reaches that value, or a certain value amount. I believe below 500 now you can get rid of it without public auction. But one of the bills that the Press Association was fighting was about surplus education property, raising it to 1,000, doing it without it, or doing it with internet auction. If you want to trade in vehicles, if it's declared surplus and it doesn't have very much value, I think you've still got to go through the auction process. However, if you're trading in a vehicle on a new vehicle, and it's actually going to replace that one, we think that it might fall under the bid specs under new vehicles. And so what you would need to do is say, let's say you're trading in a Jeep Cherokee, it's got 72,000 miles. When you get that bid spec out for whatever you're wanting to purchase, make sure that you put that in there and indicate that you want the best net price on this new vehicle based on them taking your trade-in. To us, we feel like that is above board. It allows you maybe to get more value than you would get through an auction. Maybe not, I don't know. But at least when you put it in the bid, anyone that bids has to give you a net price on that vehicle, so you're in effect seeing the best value you're gonna get for the old one, in our opinion.
We do that every year with our fleet vehicle.
Bid them out as trade-ins. And some people argue that's not allowed in statute, but to me it makes common sense. You're talking about it. We feel like it falls under the new purchase. Now, what you can't do, and what we just had a finding a few months ago, where they bought a new vehicle and they sold a vehicle very close to what I described for $23,000. Well, they thought, well, that's the best we're going to get for it, and they sold it to the same people that sold them the vehicle. But it was after the bid process, so there was no authority for doing it that way. Okay. Any local government can purchase supplies, equipment, and services for any other local government upon request. It's the same. You can go to CPO, you can go to another county or a city and ask them to make a purchase for you. I don't know what instant situation you would do that for, but you can.
Our example for us would be like SWAT team type stuff, where multiple sheriff's departments work together, and the city will make one big purchase at one time for all.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. The purchase shall be made on the same terms and of the same rules and regulations as regular purchases of the purchasing entity. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the biggest audit issue we have with this here in a minute, but any local education agency may purchase equipment on the same terms of a legal bid initiated by another LEA in Tennessee. So all that one, we have consistent issues with that, but like I said, I won't talk about it in a minute. And an LEA may purchase directly from a vendor the same equipment at the same price and on the same terms as provided in contract entered into by another LEA. Now, at least 1 out of 3 of these that we see with LEAs on piggybacking purchases from someone else, it may be that they're usually buying technology, but they are not getting the same item at the same price. If you're piggybacking off of a bid of another entity, we feel like it needs to be the same equipment or better at the same price or lower. Otherwise, all you're doing is piggybacking on a bid to select a vendor, and not the price point or the item. So we're kind of sticklers for that, and we've seen some that weren't even close. So this county had this contract with this technology supplier, so we piggybacked off of that. Well, no, you didn't. You paid more per unit, several $100s more per unit. And the argument there is, well, the technology changes so fast that it changes. Well, then, if that's the case, according to statute, you need to rebid it. So we see that quite a bit. So be careful about that one. Okay. 12.3, any municipality, county, utility district, or other local government unit may purchase anything, basically, under contracts or price agreements entered into by other local government units of the state. And I don't know, that's basically saying to me about the same thing it did before, but anyway, if this one specifically excludes motor vehicles, except for special purpose vehicles and transportation infrastructure. So you can't buy your concrete, your bridge supports and stuff like that through here. And special purpose vehicles are also defined as buses, either school buses or transportation buses that carry more than 22 passengers, ambulances, garbage trucks, fire trucks, and heavy construction equipment. The General Assembly passed a law a couple of years ago that excluded trucks and construction equipment from the cooperative purchasing agreements, and the highway departments went nuts. It got changed in that section. But it's still construction equipment, but the heavy equipment is excluded from this particular one. Okay, now we're going to get into the cooperative purchasing authorizations for local governments. First of all, you can join together with any other entity or group of entities within the state to form a cooperative purchasing group. And whoever makes the purchase, whichever entity, they have to follow their purchasing guidelines and document that they're following. Okay, so that's groups within the state. 12.3.12.05 authorizes cooperative agreements between entities outside the state. So you can join in with another government outside the state to make purchases. And 12.3.12.05 also allows for you to participate in a cooperative purchasing agreement by adopting a master agreement from that organization. And I think this probably comes in to play more prevalently with NACO, and there's another group. I don't know. Y'all know, y'all use cooperative purchasing through your professional organizations. Pardon?
National cooperative?
No, national. It's a national cooperative, like National Association of Counties that runs one. I think its purchases are through the state of Minnesota purchasing laws. Now, when that first came out, we were saying, well, it says you got to acquire and maintain documentation and assure yourself that the purchasing entities procuring the bid complied with its own purchasing requirements. We had people trying to research what Minnesota's purchasing laws were and did they comply with this particular bid, but there were multiple bids. So what we ended up doing was finally agreeing that as long as it's stated in that master agreement that you adopt, that they have complied with the state of Minnesota, and we'll leave it to the state of Minnesota auditors to verify that we're good with it. So, but make sure if you're going to use this, make sure you get the master agreement adopted by resolution of your governing body. And that's probably the most common error we see, is not adopting that. So, well, the law says we can use this, and they never go get the master agreement adopted by the commission or the council. Really, that kind of authorizes you to participate in this statute, is getting that adopted. So if you're going to do that, make sure that master agreement is on file and has been adopted by the governing body. Okay, here's the Professional Services General Statute, and this is what most everyone goes to regardless of operating authority. With 5781 private, they still kind of go to this. Contracts for legal services, fiscal agent, financial advisor or advisory services, educational consultant services, and similar services by professional persons or groups of high ethical standards shall not be based upon competitive solicitations, but shall be rewarded on the basis of recognized competence and integrity. And this has been case law, and the AG has said this prohibits you from doing this by bid. And we've had a lot of complaints for us to look in. We've had a lot of allegations from their hotline, mainly from architects, and they're covered under a different statute specifically, but they complain all the time that, hey, they talk price before they hire someone. So you can interview people for competency and so forth, but you're really not supposed to get into negotiation until you pick a firm based on their integrity and competency. And that's, yeah, I've got my own feelings about that, but the out you've got then is if you can negotiate once you've chosen. If you can't reach an agreement, that's satisfactory to you on negotiation, then you can open it back up to the next group and negotiate. That's what the law provides. But anyway, now, other groups with high ethical standards. Just about any salesman out there is going to tell you that they're in that group, so you don't have to bid their product, right? Well, this has been very narrowly held in case law and AG's opinions, and so much so that, as far as I know, CPAs are about the only thing not specifically listed in this general law that have been included in that group. So that aren't covered by engineering and architect law. That would be true in. But so you know, just tell them we had a banking bill this year about municipalities reconsidering their banking services every 4 years. And the bank said, well, we're covered under professional standards, but no. Financial advisors means people that are doing your bond prospectus and bond issues, not banking services. So even the bankers got shot down to be part of that professional standard. 12.3, 12.12. I don't know if this was y'all's bill that was introduced, but I know y'all strongly supported it. That raised the bid limit to 25,000. Pardon? Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah. And we want to clarify what we're looking at when we go out and look at this statute. We had calls as soon as this bill was passed. So I qualified. We had a small county finance director. I've already spoken to this point a little bit. They called in and said, well, I'm been appointed the purchasing agent and it's a central system. So I want to go to 25,000. I said, well, do you have a full-time deputy that works on purchasing? No, I do the purchasing. Well, our auditors know that he spends little to no time on purchasing. A lot of the departments were still really the ones, carrying the load on purchasing. And so we said no. He was mad about that because he said, well, I'm the purchasing agent, but it says full-time purchasing agent. So on the flip side of that, if you haven't really hired someone that you call a full-time purchasing agent. If you've appointed a deputy and they work full-time carrying out the purchasing, the centralized purchasing system, and we say yes, that you do qualify under that law in our opinion. Now, this has not been tested in the courts. Like if that guy in that finance director wanted to challenge it, if you could get somebody to ask AG, then maybe we'll change our opinion. But we think the legislative intent of that law is that you've got a central purchasing system and you've got a purchasing professional that's working full time to administer that system. That's our position on that. And we've had a lot of people argue that school departments didn't qualify in and of themselves. So if it's, say you got a 57 Act county, and you've got a school department. Now, first of all, under accounting guidelines, they are a legal separate entity. So we treat them under the statute as a separate entity. They've got centralized purchasing for the entire school department, but they're not centralized at the county level. Well, they still got a centralized system, and they did indeed have a full-time purchasing agent, purchasing director in this school system. And we said, yes, the school system, the Board of Education raised that to the $25,000 limit because we felt like they got centralized purchasing within their entity and they had a full-time purchasing. So that's the criteria that we look at in application of this statute when we audit. To finish up, I'm going to go over some prevalent statutes of interest. They're not really might not apply that often. The first one probably more so than others, but 124107, awarding the contracts for architects, engineering, and construction services. You can go to that code. That's a pretty long statute, but it just talks about, it's been half of the verbiage in it talking about cannot discuss price and can't consider price and hiring an architect. Their professional associations have pretty good lobbies to get that good pay. Energy-related services. This statute provides that energy savings contracts that include both engineering services and equipment do not have to be bid. We do not interpret that to mean if you're just buying equipment, that it does not have to be bid. But if you've got one of these energy savings companies that's selling your program and they're going to calculate, you're going to pay them back based on their savings. That savings is calculated on a program that they provide. So it's always much of saving. I'm still on a bias there. But anyway, if you're doing both, you don't have to bid the project. And
so if they approach you and they say, here's this sweet deal for y'all, and it meets this, you've got your governing approval, you can sign the contract. It doesn't have to be like put out, hey, can anyone else do this as well?
Does not have to be bid. Anyone that calls me and asks about it, hey, is this a reputable company? We know some of them that aren't because we've had serious dealings with them. Now, they'll say, well, you can get out of it if it's not saving you money. We had a company or a county try that in northern Middle Tennessee, and they said, well, sure, you get out of it. It'll cost you $1.6 million to get out of it. So the fine print in those contracts on those energy savings are brutal.
Yeah.
And they like I said, they literally calculate the savings based on a program that they calculate and send it to you.
Like solar panels. Is that an applicable example?
Solar panels is equipment. So, now if they've got engineering services that come along with it, one of the bad actors, and I really can't remember the name of the company. I probably wouldn't say it if I did, but anyway, they came in and we're going to monitor your savings in the school department, and we're going to guarantee you so much savings. Well, the way they monitored it was they put in thermostats, and then they taught certain teachers in the school system to run those thermostats and keep it at a certain level. And then they had the children getting sick. They had to close school down because it's almost like a Legionnaires type disease. And they thought it was the flu. Well, when they came in and looked at what the problem was, they had taped up the damper in the air system and heating system. And yeah, that provided you some savings, not pulling that through the damper, but it also got a lot of people sick. So you really got to be careful in these contracts. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the first one where it says architecture, engineering, and construction service, you define construction services with that specific.
That's talking about construction managers.
So
you do not have to bid them.
So
now
that's not contractors.
No.
Okay.
Now, and also, if you hire a construction manager, the statute provides that they cannot be a general contractor unless you bid out the general work twice and have no bidders. Not a satisfactory bid, but no bidders. And then the general contract work and the sub work under the construction manager still have to meet bid requirements. So the only thing you can do is pick out a construction manager without going through the bid process. They amended that law last year. Some of the bigger contractors wanted it to be like the construction manager at risk, where you hire them as a general contractor. They give you a fixed price. That's not legal for local governments to do. It's not legal for all agencies in the state to do. I think corrections can do that on prison bills. But But if they come to you with something like that and say, pay me 20 million and I'll build this school and I'll guarantee any overruns, that can't be done under local laws. Yes, ma'am?
In the energy related services or LED lighting, that's the main thing now coming and saying, we change all your LED lighting to save energy costs, like, so is that coming under that category?
If it's got engineering services included in it, it wouldn't have to be bid. But our position is it says both. So if they just come in and say, we're gonna retrofit the lights, and we're gonna change the thermostats out to the energy efficient one, but they're not doing any engineering services on an ongoing basis, it does not qualify. We think you still gotta bid that equipment out. Now, we've got a lot of people that haven't done that, and we've had findings on it.
And Jaya, we just bid that out this last year, so I'll see if I can get you a copy of that.
So you bid it out?
We did.
And there's the person that runs, I apologize, I can't remember his name right now, but the person that runs the state loan pool for those energy efficiency loans is, when I send you a copy of the PowerPoint for anybody that wants it, I'm also going to send you his name because he's the best source I know in the state. He knows all the contractors, he knows who's reputable, who's not. And he also gets you some cheap money if you want to go that outfit along. Paul Cross is his name. So I'll get you contact information. I'm running over. I'm going to finish up this real quick here. Let's see. And contractor bonds, that's just where you require bonds on your construction contracts. 292407, insurance not required to be bid through a government-sponsored entity, local government insurance pool or TSBA pool are the two I'm aware of. Y'all may have some. I don't think TML has an insurance pool. I think coordinate with those other two entities, but those still, as of now, do not have to be bid. There was a bill that came through that was really really didn't like those pools, but I think it finally got softened. So, but they were dead set that not only was that going to be bid if you're going through the pool, but we were also going to have to publish all their employees through the pool and their annual compensation and benefits. So they were not happy with people in the pool. 47.2.328 defines public auction. I don't have to get into that. It just talks about having the individual lots going for sale and the auctioneer and so forth. And 62.2.107 requires that any public work project involving architecture, engineering, or landscape architecture estimated cost $50,000 or more must have the services of a registered architect, registered engineer, or registered landscape architect. And you can argue whether that's needed or not, because $50,000 is not a big project sometimes, but the law is the law. They got that passed, those professional organizations. So if you got one for $50,000, you need to have one of those registered licensed people.
Is that 50K the limit for the design service or for the construction?
For the estimate of the project.
The construction cost.
Yeah. So if you think you're going to do a $30,000 project, I don't think that you have to do it.
What if you think you're gonna do a $30,000 project and it comes back with the bids that are over $50,000? You then
You have to
go back and get drawings.
62.6.102 and 103. If a construction contract is estimated to exceed $25,000, it requires the services of a licensed contractor. And I think, I don't know how big a deal this is. You all would know better than I, but I think most of the contractors that bid on these are probably licensed. And if you hire a construction manager, you don't have to bid out their services, but they have to be a licensed general contractor in order to serve. And then we see quite a few of these throughout Each year, we'll have a handful throughout the state. 6634-104 requires that you retain a portion of progress payments on a contract if all contracts, or for all contracts estimated to exceed $500,000. If you got a $20 million school project, you got to withhold that in escrow. And that gives you the details. I think most of you have done that and know what that requires. But
Can I ask, does everyone put that in their bid documents or proposal documents when it applies? You're gonna have to pay interest for it?
Yeah, we have it in our regular construction package. I was gonna ask about TDOT, because TDOT didn't always require.
You don't hold it for TDOT.
Yeah, they don't ever, they have TDOT, and TDOT doesn't require anything of, I mean, I've got two that are going out right now, but we don't take retainage.
Mm-mm.
I think federal law has an option to
Not do it.
not do it. There you probably using federal money.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, it's passed through.
Real quickly, a couple other audit issues that we have each year. These are just, we still have internal control issues. These are usually in the smaller counties, but improper use of purchase orders. We've got some counties that we want a purchase order, I'll fill it out, and after they make the purchase and get the invoice, to fill out the purchase order. Not coincidentally, those, maybe coincidentally, those are places where we see a lot of over expenditures, where they're actually exceeding their appropriation. Improper use of purchase orders, no receiving signature. That's just a good control to make sure that you receive what you purchased. And incompatible duties in smaller counties, this is an issue. They have to work really hard to segregate their duties. But we'll have some that make the purchases, receive the goods, posting the ledgers, and then cause the checks to be written and distribute the checks. So, good question.
I have a general one question, please. So, I have P cards, and some of the directors have P cards. But at one point, some years ago, our finance director didn't think directors should have P cards. You see any issues? Have you seen anything come up?
Yes, I've seen many things come up with big cards.
I mean, no, what directors do. Yeah, we know that's a whole thing. What the directors have. Right.
Getting approved by the superintendent.
It's the approval issue.
Your charge of authority, which you have in place, anything in place and follow it, then.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes a lot of work, as you all would know better than anyone, to control this. Really got to make sure you've got your codes locked down.
So I mean, these directors have procurement authority up to the limits that's on there, so.
I
don't know why. You're saying a director shouldn't have it?
Is it because the director is the first approval authority for that department, and that's where the issue seems to be?
I don't know, I guess, but that director can sign off on all purchases for that department, so.
Yeah.
Actually, in ours, it goes for the higher authority. The superintendent has to approve the director's purchase. So it is being approved by
We're the
somebody
final
else.
approval, so I don't know why we couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, ours go through 3 sets of eyes, so.
And should the candidate to.
Anyway, just
Yeah.
curious.
Anybody in here from Knox County?
They
No,
left.
he left us.
I spent 3 months of my life doing big
Yes,
card
we
audits.
know. Yeah, this is all on the internet now, too.
And actually, they had a really good system. They were just a few isolated bad actors there, where they didn't have controls of the department. But the purchasing system, they had those codes tied down. They didn't. This issue is becoming more and more problematic for us. It's improperly issued capital leases. I'd say the bulk of these are for pro cars and student computers in bulk for school departments. And the reason that they purchase, and I don't know if y'all have a problem with these dealing with your departments like we've had, but a salesman will approach a sheriff and say, we can get you these 5 cars, or you can sign this lease and you can get them. You don't have to have any approval from anybody. Well, under state law, a capital lease is a long-term debt obligation. It has to be approved by, first of all, they gotta be bid, I mean, some of these aren't even being bid. It's gotta be approved by, the county commission. As a debt obligation, it's gotta be reported as such to our division of state and local finance. Anytime you issue a debt instrument, you've got to make a report to them. So, what the sheriffs like about it, and what the school departments sometimes like about it, is that they think they don't have to have any approval for it. You know, we've got it within our budget to make these monthly payments. We're just gonna go out and buy this, and we're gonna sign the contract. Most of the time, they don't have the authority to sign the contract, but they do it anyway, especially the sheriffs. And so we're just trying to educate them through findings and other ways that you can't do that. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here, because I think you all probably know that. And if they try to do it in your entity, it's probably an issue for you as well. But unless it's just a strict rental, like a copy machine, then it's got to go through those hoops as if it's a debt instrument. And it's got to be approved at all those levels. So that's okay. I'm sorry I ran over. And I apologize for my subject matter of my presentation, but that's what we all do. Yes, sir.
I'm with the city, and I'm curious that I didn't see mention of the 1983 municipal purchasing law. And I just wonder if it, in your mind, has become kind of obsolete because of the Chapter 12 provisions.
No, sir. And my disclaimer, if you go back to that, there's a lot of things in municipal governments I'm ignorant of. We have responsibility for the audits of municipalities, but as you know, we do a three-party contract for those. So we don't get out and do a lot of the work. Therefore, I'm not familiar with a lot of the charters. The ones I am familiar with, because we've had issues, we've had to actually go in and work on. So with allegations. So I left that out. That was an omission on my part that I don't think is important. I don't know if it is or not.
Ask your lawyer.
Well,
There you go.
he knows better than I do about that. I apologize, but like I said, I'm just not that familiar with the municipal statutes. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I don't know if you guys handle this part of it. It deals with capitalized equipment. We had a situation last year where we had bulk purchases for like iPads or computers, but then we'd also have smaller purchase orders that would be, you know, like the iPad might cost $500. And so our threshold limit for capitalization is 5,000. So those wouldn't be capitalized, but if we were ordering a huge amount, the auditors told us that we need to capitalize that whole purchase order because the amount was so large. And so now I'm like putting things into fixed assets where it's an iPad that's still $500, but it's being classified as a capitalized item because the auditors told us to
Does it
change
fit within
it that
your,
way.
I mean, did you have a life on your capitalization policy? Does it fit within the life of that?
And I mean, most of them are under, they're purchased with Apple Care too. And in my experience, the life of the iPad is usually 3 to 4 years at max anyway, so.
Right. But you got a capitalization threshold that says 3 years. Or-
You know, I don't know about that.
That's what I'm saying, it's usually $5,000, 4 or 5 years.
I'll have to look into that, because we had to change a lot of our fixed assets last year after our auditors came.
To answer your question, and Leanne, you jump in if I'm saying something incorrectly, I don't think it would be. I think, you know, if you're going out to buy $50,000 of them at once, that does qualify for a bid. But you can't look at that individually, but when you go to capitalization, I think.
Yeah, that's what we tell people. If you buy them in bulk, you need to bid it, but if you wouldn't put it in your capital assets, if you bought it individually, I don't see why you would if you bought 100 of them. They're still individually not above your threshold.
Who are you with?
Arlington Community Schools. So we're getting ready for the end of the fiscal year. We're going to be going through all those purchase orders to make sure that things got capitalized the way they instructed us last year. So is there someone in particular that I should talk to before we go ahead and make all those changes? And do we need to make last year changes back to not capitalized?
I don't think it should be capitalized. And if you want us to, we actually advise the firms that do the audits in the city, so if you want us to contact them, we can do that.
Okay.
I'll leave you a card.
It's just a little
and
more work on my
you
part
can
to
contact.
capitalize.
That's a lot of work.
Well, it's just, I mean, for
And it's needless.
an iPad, it's got a life of 3 to 4 years. I think I probably want to revisit my capitalization policy if it says 2 years.
If it doesn't have time.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you very much for listening to me today. I apologize for the answers I couldn't give you on a lot of municipal questions. We do have people in our office that deal more with the auditors that deal with municipalities. So I will send out a copy of this PowerPoint, and I'll also give you my contact information. And you can, I will get the people dealing with municipalities in touch with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.